The sound of shattering crystal silenced the entire room. Everyone at Levelum, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, turned to look. In the center of the room, Marcus Thorne, a man whose face was plastered on half the business magazines in the city, was standing over a trembling waitress, his face purple with rage. "Don't play innocent with me, you little gutter rat," Thorne screamed, spit flying from his lips. "That watch is worth more than your entire life. Empty your pockets, or I will have you thrown in a cell so dark you'll forget what sunlight looks like." Jane, the waitress, held her hands up, tears streaming down her face. She had no idea that in exactly 20 minutes, the security footage would reveal a truth so shocking it would not only end Thorne's career, but destroy his entire life. But first, she had to survive the humiliation. Jane Jenkins adjusted her apron, smoothing the stark white fabric over her black slacks. Her hands were shaking slightly. They always did when she worked the Friday night shift at Levelum. This wasn't just a restaurant. It was a theater of wealth, a place where a single bottle of wine cost more than Jane's rent for 6 months. She checked her reflection in the brass siding of the service station. Tired eyes looked back. She was 26 but felt 40. Between her mother's dialysis treatments at St. Jude's and the mounting debt from her student loans, Jane was drowning. This job, with its high tips and demanding clientele, was the only lifeline she had. "Table 4 is yours, Jane," the maître d', a rigid man named Elias Vance, whispered as he glided past. "VIP, handle with extreme care. That is Marcus Thorne." Jane's stomach dropped. Everyone in the service industry knew the name. Marcus Thorne was a hedge fund manager known for 2 things: making billions in the tech sector and treating service staff like furniture. He was currently under investigation by the SEC, according to the tabloids, but he still walked around like he owned the pavement he stepped on. She took a deep breath, put on her customer service mask, and walked to table 4. Thorne was already seated, scrolling furiously on his phone. He was a large man, wearing a suit that cost a fortune, but fit him poorly. Opposite him sat a younger woman, looking bored and terrifyingly beautiful. "Good evening, sir, madam," Jane said, her voice steady. "Welcome to Levelum. My name is Jane, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with sparkling water? Pellegrino, ice on the side, not in the glass," Thorne barked without looking up from his phone. "And bring the wine list, the reserve list, not the garbage you show the tourists." "Of course, sir," Jane said, noting the aggression immediately. The dinner service was a minefield. Thorne complained about the temperature of the bread. He sent back the appetizer, a pristine Wagyu tartare, claiming it smelled like a wet dog, even though the chef, Jean-Luc, was a 3-star Michelin genius. Throughout the meal, Jane remained invisible and efficient. She refilled glasses before they were empty. She anticipated needs before they were spoken. She was performing a delicate dance, trying to keep the beast calm. She needed this tip. Her mother's medication cost had gone up again, and the rent was 3 days late. By the time the main course was cleared, a rack of lamb Thorne had actually eaten without complaint, Jane allowed herself a moment of relief. They were moving to dessert. The hard part was over. Thorne leaned back, unbuttoning his suit jacket. He looked flushed, his eyes darting around the room nervously, though he tried to mask it with arrogance. He tapped his wrist, looking at the time, and then froze. A look of exaggerated panic crossed his face. He patted his jacket pocket. Then his pants pocket. He looked under the table. "Sir." Jane stepped forward with the dessert menu. "Is everything all right?" Thorne stood up slowly, his eyes locking onto Jane with a predatory glint. The room seemed to drop in temperature. "My watch," he said, his voice dangerously low. My Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime. I took it off to wash my hands in the restroom, and I put it right here on the table next to the bread basket. I went to the restroom again just now, and you cleared the table. Jane's blood ran cold. Sir, I cleared the bread basket, but there was no watch. I would have seen it. Are you calling me a liar? Thorne's voice rose, carrying across the hushed dining room. No, sir, absolutely not. I'm just saying I didn't see— It was a $2 million timepiece, Thorne shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The cutlery rattled. And you are the only person who has been at this table. The silence that followed was suffocating. Every diner in the vicinity stopped eating. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. At table 7, the CEO of a major tech firm watched with narrowed eyes. At table 2, a famous actress lowered her sunglasses to get a better look. Elias Vance, the maitre d', materialized instantly. He looked like he was about to faint. A scandal at Levelum was the ultimate sin. Mr. Thorne, please, Vance whispered, his hands clasped. What seems to be the trouble? The trouble, Thorne spat, pointing a thick finger at Jane's chest, is that you employ thieves. This girl stole my watch. I placed it right there. She cleared the table. Now it's gone. Jane. Vance turned to her, his face pale. There was no support in his eyes, only fear of the wealthy man in front of him. Did you see the watch? No, Mr. Vance, I swear. Jane's voice trembled. I cleared the plates. I crumbed the table. There was nothing there. I would never steal anything. Oh, save the sob story, Thorne sneered. He turned to the room, addressing the audience he had captivated. Look at her. Look at her shoes, worn out. Look at her hair. She's desperate. She saw a chance to change her life, and she took it. It's pathetic. Jane felt the heat rise in her cheeks. It wasn't just fear. It was shame. He was stripping her dignity away, layer by layer in front of the city's elite. Sir, Jane said, her voice gaining a desperate edge. I have worked here for 4 years. I have never had a complaint. You can check my pockets. You can check my apron. I don't have it. Oh, we will do more than check your pockets, Thorne said, a cruel smile playing on his lips. I want the police. Now. Mr. Thorne, Vance stammered. Perhaps we can settle this internally. We can have the staff. I said call the police, Thorne roared. And lock the doors. Nobody leaves. This girl probably passed it off to a bus boy or slipped it into the trash to retrieve later. I want a full search. Vance nodded frantically and scurried to the host stand to make the call. Jane stood there, isolated. Her hands were shaking so hard she had to grip the fabric of her apron to stop them. She looked at the woman sitting with Thorne. The woman looked down at her plate, refusing to meet Jane's eyes. Why are you doing this? Jane whispered, barely audible. I didn't take it. Thorne leaned in close, so only she could hear. His breath smelled of expensive cognac and rot. Because, sweetheart, I need an insurance claim, and you look like the perfect scapegoat. Who are they going to believe? Marcus Thorne, or a nobody waitress with holes in her shoes? The cruelty of it took Jane's breath away. He wasn't just mistaken. He was framing her. He was destroying her life for a payout. You won't get away with this, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. I already have, Thorne grinned, straightening his tie. Minutes later, the blue and red lights flashed against the large bay windows. 2 officers walked in. One was a young rookie, looking overwhelmed by the opulence of the restaurant. The other was an older man, Sergeant Miller, with a face carved out of granite. What's the problem here? Miller asked, his voice booming. She stole my watch, Thorne declared, pointing at Jane again. $2 million. Patek Philippe. I want her arrested, and I want her searched. Sergeant Miller looked at Jane. He saw the terror in her eyes. He saw the way she was holding herself together by a thread. He had been a cop for 30 years. He knew a professional criminal, and he knew a terrified civilian. Jane looked like the latter. "Mum," Miller said calmly, "did you take the gentleman's watch?" "No, officer. I swear on my mother's life," Jane sobbed. "Then you won't mind if we check your person and your locker?" "Please," Jane said. "Check everything. I have nothing to hide." The humiliation of the next 20 minutes was excruciating. A female officer was called in to pat Jane down in the restroom while the wealthy patrons gossiped outside. They checked her socks. They checked her hair. They checked the lining of her apron. Nothing. They marched her to the staff room and emptied her locker. An old cardigan, a picture of her mother, a bottle of ibuprofen, and a bus pass. Nothing. Thorne was pacing the dining room floor when they returned. "Well, where is it?" "She doesn't have it on her, Mr. Thorne," Sergeant Miller said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "And it's not in her locker." "Then she ditched it," Thorne yelled. "She threw it in the trash, or she gave it to the dishwasher. Search the kitchen. Tear this place apart." The manager, Vance, looked like he was about to weep. "Mr. Thorne, please, the disruption." "I don't care about your disruption. I care about my property." Jane stood by the kitchen door, feeling like a ghost. Her life was ending. Even if she wasn't arrested, she was fired. No restaurant in New York would hire a waitress accused of stealing a $2 million watch from a VIP. She thought of her mother at the hospital. How would she pay the bill next week? The despair was a physical weight crushing her chest. "Wait!" A deep voice cut through the noise. Everyone turned. Standing near the entrance was a man in a dark grey suit. He wasn't a customer. He was broad-shouldered, with a scar running through his left eyebrow and an earpiece coiled behind his ear. It was Frank O'Malley. He was the head of security for the building that housed the restaurant, a luxury high-rise. O'Malley was ex-Secret Service, a man who rarely came down to the restaurant unless there was a fire or a fight. "We don't need to tear the kitchen apart," O'Malley said, walking toward the group. His walk was slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly calm. He held a tablet in his hand. "And who are you?" Thorne snapped. "Rent-a-cop. Stay out of this." O'Malley ignored the insult. He stopped in front of Sergeant Miller and nodded respectfully. "Sergeant, good to see you again." "O'Malley," Miller nodded back. "You got something?" "I do," O'Malley said. He turned his cold gaze toward Marcus Thorne. "Mr. Thorne claims he left the watch on the table when he went to the restroom the second time, correct?" "That's right," Thorne said, puffing out his chest. "Right next to the bread basket." "And that was at approximately 8:45 p.m., O'Malley asked. "Yes, around then. What is your point?" O'Malley tapped the screen of his tablet. "This building was retrofitted with 4K security cameras last month, Mr. Thorne, including the dining room. We have high-definition coverage of every table. Blind spots are a liability for our insurance." Thorne's face twitched. The color drained from his cheek slightly. "So? Show the footage of her taking it?" "That's the interesting thing," O'Malley said, his voice dropping an octave. "I just reviewed the footage from 8:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Jane cleared the table at 8:48 p.m. O'Malley turned the tablet around so the Sergeant, Thorne, and Jane could see. "But look at your wrist, Mr. Thorne," O'Malley said. On the screen, grainy but clear enough, was Marcus Thorne walking to the restroom. "You aren't wearing the watch," Sergeant Miller observed. "I told you," Thorne stammered. "I took it off before I went to the restroom." "Keep watching," O'Malley said. The video showed Thorne coming back from the restroom. He sat down, he ate his dessert, and then the camera zoomed in. "Wait a minute," Sergeant Miller said, leaning in. O'Malley swiped to a different camera angle, one hidden in the decorative moulding above the table. The video showed Thorne reaching into his own jacket pocket. He pulled out a small, glittering object. He didn't put it on the table. He didn't drop it. He slid it into the open purse of the woman sitting across from him while she was looking at her phone. The silence in the restaurant was absolute. It was heavier than the silence after the accusation. This was the silence of a predator being caught in a trap. The woman sitting at the table gasped. She grabbed her purse and dumped it onto the tablecloth. Lipstick, keys, a wallet, and a Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime watch clattered onto the white linen. Thorne stepped back, bumping into a waiter. She must have taken it. She's in on it with the waitress. Stop talking, Marcus, the woman said, standing up. She looked disgusted. You put that in my bag? You tried to frame a waitress using me as a mule? It's not what it looks like, Thorne yelled, sweat pouring down his face now. The video is doctored. This is a setup. Do you know who I am? Yeah, O'Malley said, stepping closer, his physical presence looming over the smaller man. We know who you are, and we know you filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy this morning, privately. A collective gasp went through the room. What? Thorne whispered. My contacts in the city are good, O'Malley said. You're broke, Mr. Thorne. You're leveraged to the hilt. You needed a quick $2 million insurance payout for a stolen watch to cover a margin call due tomorrow, and you decided to destroy this young woman's life to get it. Thorne looked around the room. The admiration was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left in the eyes of the elite patrons was disgust. He was no longer one of them. He was a fraud. Arrest him, Sergeant Miller said, pulling out his handcuffs. No, you can't, Thorne shrieked, as the officer grabbed his wrist. I am Marcus Thorne. I will sue this entire city. I will buy this building and burn it down. As they dragged him out, kicking and screaming, the restaurant erupted into applause. Not polite applause, raucous, cheering applause. Jane stood there, stunned. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her knees weak. O'Malley walked over to her. The intimidating security chief softened his expression. You okay, Jane? I think so, she whispered. Thank you, Mr. O'Malley. You saved my life. Just doing the job, he smiled. But the night isn't over yet. Jane looked at him, confused. What do you mean? The owner of the building was watching the feed from his penthouse upstairs, O'Malley said. He saw everything. He wants to see you, now. Jane's heart hammered against her ribs again. The owner? The mysterious billionaire who owned the Harrington Tower? Nobody ever saw him. He was a recluse. Why would he want to see a waitress? Am I in trouble? She asked. No, O'Malley said, a twinkle in his eye. But I think your life is about to change again. Come with me. The elevator ride to the 90th floor took a full minute. Jane smoothed her apron again, trying to wipe the tears from her cheeks. She felt gritty and exhausted. When the doors opened, she stepped into a room that looked more like a museum than an apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of New York City at night. A fire crackled in a massive stone hearth. Sitting in a leather armchair by the fire was an elderly man with a cane. He had shock-white hair and piercing blue eyes. Come in, Jane, he said. His voice was raspy but strong. Jane stepped forward tentatively. Mr. Harrington? Please call me Arthur, he said. He gestured to the chair opposite him. Sit. You've had a hell of a night. Jane sat on the edge of the velvet chair. Sir, I am so sorry about the disturbance downstairs. I tried to handle it quietly. You handled it with grace, Arthur Harrington said. Better than I would have. I saw how you stood your ground. I saw your dignity. He reached for a glass of water on the table. His hand shook violently. A tremor. He couldn't grip the glass. Without thinking, Jane reached out, gently took the glass, and placed it securely in his hand, guiding it to his lips. It was a reflex from years of caring for her sick mother. Arthur drank, then looked at her with intense curiosity. "You're a natural caretaker, aren't you?" "I take care of my mother, sir," Jane said softly. "She's ill." "I know," Arthur said. Jane froze. "How do you know?" "O'Malley is thorough. When the police were called, I had him run a background check on everyone involved. Not just Thorne, you too." Arthur sighed. "I know about the debts, the dialysis, the 3 jobs you've worked in the last 5 years." Jane looked down at her hands. "I do what I have to do." "Thorne called you a thief," Arthur mused. "But a thief takes. You give. You give your time, your energy, your youth, to care for someone else." Arthur leaned forward. "I have a proposition for you, Jane. I'm dying." Jane's eyes widened. "Sir?" "Parkinson's, and a few other things the doctors can't pronounce. I have no children. My wife passed 10 years ago. I am surrounded by sharks, like Marcus Thorne. People who want my money, my buildings, my legacy. They wait for me to die like vultures." He paused, looking at the fire. "I need someone I can trust. Someone who knows what it means to struggle and still stay honest. Someone who can stand up to a bully when the whole world is watching." He turned his gaze back to her. "I don't need a waitress, Jane. I need a personal assistant, a caretaker. Someone to manage my affairs in these final years and ensure my estate goes to charity, not to the greedy board members of my company." Jane was stunned. "Sir, I don't have any experience in business." "I don't need business experience. I can hire MBAs by the dozen. I need character. You have that." Arthur smiled. "The starting salary is $200,000 a year, plus full medical benefits for you and your mother. St. Jude's has a private wing. I can get her in there tomorrow." Jane felt the room spin. 200,000? That would solve everything. It was a miracle. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Say yes," Arthur said. "But there is a catch." Of course, there was always a catch. "What is it?" Jane asked, bracing herself. "Marcus Thorne isn't just a random customer," Arthur said, his face hardening. "He is, or was, a member of my board of directors. He has allies, powerful allies. By exposing him tonight, you didn't just embarrass a rich guy. You started a war. If you work for me, you will be on the front lines. They will come for you. They will try to discredit you. They will dig into your past." Arthur looked her dead in the eye. "Are you brave enough for that, Jane? Because if you accept this job, the drama downstairs was just the appetizer." The transition from serving tables at Levelum to managing the life of Arthur Harrington was not a step up. It was a leap into a volcano. 3 days after the incident, Jane arrived at the executive suite of Harrington Enterprises on the 50th floor. She wasn't wearing her waitress uniform anymore. She wore a slate-grey pantsuit she had bought at a thrift store, tailored to fit her perfectly. She needed armor. The office was a hive of activity. Analysts shouted into phones, assistants sprinted with coffees, and the air smelled of ozone and stress. When Jane walked in, the noise didn't stop, but the temperature seemed to drop. Eyes followed her. They knew who she was. The waitress, the charity case. She walked straight to the desk assigned to her, right outside Arthur's massive oak doors. But before she could sit, a woman blocked her path. She was tall, wearing a crimson dress that cost more than Jane's mother's car, and her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful. This was Linda Sterling, the vice chair of the board, and, as Arthur had warned, Marcus Thorne's closest ally. "You must be the new—" "Help," Linda said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She didn't extend a hand. "I'm Arthur's new executive assistant," Jane corrected, keeping her voice even. "Jane Jenkins." "Right, the girl from the restaurant," Linda smirked, inspecting her manicured nails. "Look, let me be clear, honey. Arthur is eccentric. He's old. He picks up strays. But this isn't a soup kitchen. This is a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. We deal with mergers, acquisitions, and international trade. We don't deal with spilled soup." "I learn fast," Jane said, stepping around her. "Do you?" Linda turned, her eyes narrowing. "Marcus Thorne is out on bail, you know. His lawyers are already drafting a lawsuit, claiming defamation and entrapment. They are saying you and O'Malley conspired to doctor that footage, and when Arthur dies, which will be soon, I will be running this company. If I were you, I'd grab as many office supplies as you can and run back to the kitchen." Jane stopped. She felt that familiar tremble in her hands, the one she used to get when customers yelled. But she remembered Arthur's words. "Are you brave enough?" She turned back to Linda. "Ms. Sterling, right? Arthur requested the Q3 financial reports be on my desk by noon. If you're done threatening me, I suggest you get to work. Unless you want me to tell Arthur that his vice chair has too much free time." Linda's jaw tightened. She glared at Jane with pure venom. "You'll regret this, you little rat." For the next 2 months, the war Arthur predicted became a daily reality. Files accidentally went missing from Jane's desk. Her email account was locked out 3 times. Strange men in dark cars followed her home to her small apartment in Queens. But Jane didn't break. She worked 18-hour days. She organized Arthur's chaotic schedule. She deciphered complex legal documents, staying up until 400 a.m. researching corporate law. She became indispensable. Arthur's health, however, was deteriorating. The tremors were getting worse. Some days he couldn't get out of bed. Jane spent those days at his penthouse, reading to him and managing the company from his bedside. One rainy Tuesday in November, Jane was in Arthur's private study in the penthouse, looking for an old deed to a property in Brooklyn that Linda Sterling was trying to sell cheaply. Arthur suspected Linda was selling company assets to her own shell companies, embezzling millions. Jane opened a dusty filing cabinet in the back of the study. It was locked, but Arthur had given her the keyring. She flipped through folders. Tax returns 1998, blueprints 2001, personnel files. Then her fingers stopped on a thick, yellowed envelope. It didn't have a label. It just had a name handwritten in faded ink. Robert Jenkins. Jane's breath hitched. That was her father's name. Her father had walked out on her and her mother 20 years ago. He had gone to find work in the city and never came back. Her mother rarely spoke of him, only saying he was a dreamer who got crushed by the city. Why was his name in the file of a billionaire real estate mogul? With trembling hands, Jane opened the envelope. Inside were blueprints, detailed, hand-drawn sketches of an innovative structural support system for skyscrapers, the very system that made the Harrington Tower possible. Underneath the blueprints was a contract, a partnership agreement between Arthur Harrington and Robert Jenkins, dated 22 years ago. And then a police report. Subject: Robert Jenkins. Incident: embezzlement. Status: arrested. Jane read the report, her heart pounding against her ribs. It alleged that Robert Jenkins had stolen funds from the construction budget. The main witness against him? Marcus Thorne. Jane dropped the papers. Her father hadn't just left. He had been framed. He had been destroyed by the same men who were now trying to destroy her. He had been Arthur's partner and Thorne had pushed him out to steal his designs. "You found it," a weak voice rasped from the doorway. Jane spun around. Arthur was standing there, leaning heavily on his cane, looking paler than usual. "You knew," Jane whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "You knew who I was?" "Not at first," Arthur admitted, limping into the room. "But when I saw your last name, and I saw your face, you look just like him, Jane. Robert was the brilliant mind behind this company. I was just the money. Thorne was the shark. He convinced me Robert was stealing. I was young, stupid, and greedy. I believed him. I let them send your father to prison. He died in a halfway house 3 years later." Arthur slumped into a chair, tears streaming down his old face. "I have carried that guilt for 2 decades. When I saw you that night at the restaurant, standing up to Thorne, it felt like a sign, a chance for penance." "You let my father die," Jane said, her voice shaking with rage. "My mother worked herself into an early grave because of you." "I know," Arthur whispered, "and I can never fix that. But I can give you what is yours. That isn't just a file, Jane. That's the proof. Robert owns 40% of this company. You don't work for me. Technically, you own nearly half of everything." Before Jane could process this bombshell, the front door of the penthouse smashed open. "Security!" O'Malley's voice roared from the hallway, followed by the sound of a scuffle. Linda Sterling walked into the study, flanked by 2 private security guards and a man in a sharp suit, Marcus Thorne. Thorne looked thinner, meaner. His eyes were wild. "Touching reunion," Thorne sneered, "but I'm afraid the party is over." "Get out of my house," Arthur growled, trying to stand, but his legs gave out. Jane rushed to catch him. "It's not your house anymore, old man," Linda Sterling said, tossing a document onto the desk. "We just held an emergency board meeting. Based on your erratic behavior, hiring a waitress as an executive, giving her access to sensitive files, we invoked Article 25. You are deemed mentally incapacitated." "That's a lie," Jane shouted. "He is perfectly sane. And you," Thorne pointed a gun, an actual suppressed pistol, at Jane. "You are a thief. We found the evidence that you've been funneling money into your mother's medical accounts illegally." "I haven't taken a dime," Jane cried. "The records say otherwise," Linda smiled cruelly. "It's amazing what a good IT guy can do in 10 minutes. Thorne stepped closer. "Here is how this goes. Arthur signs over his voting rights to Linda. You, Jane, sign a confession admitting to embezzlement in exchange for us not prosecuting your dying mother. We bury this story about your father, and everyone walks away. And if we refuse," Arthur wheezed, "then Arthur has a tragic fall from his balcony due to a dizzy spell," Thorne said cold-bloodedly. "And Jane, well, disappearing acts run in the family." Jane looked at the gun, then at the file on the desk, the proof of her father's legacy. She looked at Arthur, the man who had betrayed her father but was trying to save her now. She felt a strange calm wash over her. Panic was useless. This was chess. "You're sloppy, Marcus," Jane said quietly. Thorne blinked. "Excuse me? You're sloppy. You were sloppy at the restaurant, and you're sloppy now. You think O'Malley is just a bouncer?" "O'Malley is unconscious in the hallway," one of the guards grunted. "Is he?" Jane looked at the smoke detector on the ceiling. "Arthur installed a silent panic system 3 weeks ago. It doesn't call the police. It calls the FBI." Thorne's eyes darted to the ceiling. "And," Jane continued, stepping in front of Arthur, "this entire room is audio recorded. Cloud storage, real-time upload. You just confessed to blackmail, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder on a live feed." Linda Sterling's face went white. "Marcus," Is she bluffing? She's a waitress. Of course she's bluffing, Thorne yelled, raising the gun. Give me the papers. Crash. The floor-to-ceiling window behind them shattered inward. It wasn't the FBI. It was O'Malley. He hadn't been unconscious. He had been flanking them. He swung in on a window washer's rig from the floor above, crashing through the glass like a wrecking ball. Glass flew everywhere. Thorne fired a shot wild, hitting the ceiling. O'Malley tackled Thorne, slamming him into the stone fireplace. The gun skittered across the floor. The two private guards lunged at O'Malley, but the ex-Secret Service agent was a machine. He broke the first guard's nose with a swift elbow and swept the legs of the second. Linda Sterling screamed and scrambled for the door, but Jane was faster. She grabbed a heavy bronze statue from the desk and blocked the exit. Going somewhere, Linda? Jane panted, adrenaline surging through her veins. Get out of my way! I'm rich! I can pay you! Linda shrieked. I don't want your money, Jane said. I want your resignation. Sirens wailed in the distance. Real sirens this time. Thorne lay groaning on the floor, O'Malley's knee pressed into his back. It's over, Marcus, O'Malley grunted. This time you aren't getting bail. Arthur sat in his chair, clutching his chest, gasping for air. Jane! Jane dropped the statue and ran to him. Arthur, hold on! His face was grey. The stress was too much. The file, he whispered. Take it. Take the company. Make it right. Then his eyes rolled back, and he went limp. The fall was swift and brutal. Arthur Harrington's collapse wasn't just a medical emergency. It was the signal for the wolves to attack. By the time the ambulance reached Mount Sinai Hospital, the narrative had already changed. Jane sat in the waiting room, her clothes still stained with soot from the fireplace scuffle, her hands trembling. She watched the news on the mounted TV. A breaking news banner flashed across the screen. Harrington CEO hospitalized. Assistant under investigation for elder abuse. They work fast, a cold voice said. Jane looked up to see Mr. Finch, the general counsel for Harrington Enterprises, standing over her. He was flanked by two police officers, not the friendly ones like Sergeant Miller, but grim-faced officers from the precinct. Mr. Finch? Jane stood up, wiping her eyes. How is he? Can I see him? You are not family, Ms. Jenkins, Finch said, handing her a thick envelope. And as of 20 minutes ago, you are no longer an employee. The board has convened an emergency session via teleconference. Your contract is terminated for cause. For cause? Jane stammered. I just saved his life. Thorne was threatening to kill us. Mr. Thorne claims he was invited to the penthouse for a negotiation, and that your associate, Mr. O'Malley, assaulted him unprovoked, Finch recited legally. Furthermore, the recording you claim to have is inadmissible. In the state of New York, unauthorized surveillance in a private residence without the owner's conscious consent is a felony. Since Arthur is in a coma, he cannot consent. The recording is fruit of the poisonous tree. It doesn't exist in the eyes of the law. Jane felt the blood drain from her face. They had twisted everything. But I have the proxy, Jane argued, pulling the papers from her bag. Arthur signed over decision-making power to me. Finch snatched the papers from her hand. He didn't even look at them before ripping them in half. The board has filed an injunction claiming Arthur was mentally incompetent when he signed these. You are a waitress, Miss Jenkins. No judge in this city will believe a billionaire of sound mind handed his empire to a girl who serves coffee. You are barred from the building. If you step foot on Harrington property, you will be arrested for trespassing. Finch leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. And one more thing. The company medical benefits, cancelled, effective immediately. The next 3 days were a nightmare. Jane wasn't allowed near Arthur's room. He was guarded by private security, hired by Linda Sterling. He was alone, dying, surrounded by enemies. But the real blow came at St. Jude's. Jane stood at the reception desk of the renal ward. The hospital administrator, a woman who looked sympathetic but firm, shook her head. "I'm sorry, Jane. The insurance provider rejected the claim for this week's dialysis. They flagged the policy as terminated due to employment fraud." "You can't stop the treatment," Jane begged, grabbing the counter. "She will die without it. Please, I'll pay you. I'll get the money." "The bill for the private wing is $15,000 a week," the administrator said gently. "Unless you can provide a credit card right now." Jane checked her bank account. $400. She had to move her mother back to the public ward, into a crowded room with 3 other patients. Her mother, weak and confused, squeezed Jane's hand. "It's okay, baby," her mother whispered, her skin looking grey and papery. "We've been poor before. We'll survive." Jane walked out into the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan. She sat on a bench in Central Park, utterly defeated. She had the file, the blueprints, and the contract proving her father owned 40% of the company, but she had no money for a lawyer to enforce it. The legal system was a machine that ran on gold, and she was empty. She looked at the skyline. The Harrington Tower pierced the clouds, a monument to her father's genius and Arthur's guilt. Now it was going to be sold for parts by vultures. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. She pulled it out. Unknown number. "What?" she answered, her voice hollow. "Don't hang up," a gruff voice said. It was O'Malley. "Frank," Jane sat up. "Where are you? The police are looking for you." "Let them look," O'Malley said. "I'm in a safe house in Jersey." "Listen to me, Jane. I've been monitoring the internal comms at the tower. Finch and Sterling are moving the timeline up." "What do you mean?" "The emergency shareholder meeting isn't next week. It's tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. They are terrified Arthur might wake up, so they are rushing the vote to dissolve the company and sell it to Sterling Holdings." "Let them sell it," Jane said, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "I can't stop them, Frank. I can't even get in the lobby. They won. I'm just a waitress." "Is that what you are?" O'Malley asked sharply. "Just a waitress?" Jane went silent. "Because the Arthur Harrington I knew didn't pick a waitress," O'Malley continued. "He picked a fighter. He told me about your father, Jane, Robert Jenkins. He was the only man Arthur ever respected, because he could see solutions where other people saw walls." "My father died in disgrace," Jane whispered. "Your father died protecting his work," O'Malley corrected. "Now, are you going to let them sell his legacy for scrap metal? There is one chance." "One." "What chance?" "The board isn't unanimous. There is a silent partner, Hiroshi Tanaka. He hates Linda Sterling. If you can get into that room and prove your claim before the vote is finalized, Tanaka will back you. He's a stickler for the rules. But you have to be in the room. I told you, Frank, the elevators require a biometric scan now. The stairwells are alarmed. There is no way up." "There is always a way," O'Malley said. "Look at the blueprints, Jane. The ones Arthur gave you. Your father designed that building. He didn't trust the suits even back then. I bet my pension he built a back door." Jane looked at the waterproof bag by her feet, where she kept the precious file. She pulled out the large, folded schematics, shielding them from the rain with her jacket. She traced the lines of the foundation: sub-basement, generator room, HVAC systems. Her finger stopped on a ventilation shaft that ran the entire vertical length of the building. It was marked for industrial exhaust only. But at the junction of the 51st floor, there was a small, handwritten note in faded blue ink. "Service Access B, Emergency Override Code, ROBBIE." Jane's heart stopped. Robbie, her father's nickname. He hadn't just built a ventilation shaft. He had built a way to get to the heart of the beast, hidden in the walls, protected by a password only his family would know. A fire ignited in Jane's chest. It burned away the sadness. It burned away the fear. "Frank," she said into the phone, her voice steady and dangerous. "Yeah?" "Meet me at the south loading dock at 7 a.m. Bring a crowbar, climbing gear, and a suit." "A suit?" O'Malley laughed dryly. "What for?" "Because," Jane said, standing up and looking at the tower one last time, "I'm not going in there as a trespasser. I'm going in there as the CEO." The boardroom of Harrington Enterprises was designed to intimidate. Located on the 51st floor, it was a fortress of glass, polished mahogany, and cold steel. The air conditioning was set to a freezing temperature, keeping the 12 board members alert and on edge. At the head of the table sat Linda Sterling. She looked like a queen on her coronation day. She checked her watch, tapping a manicured fingernail against the wood. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are wasting time," Linda said, her voice sharp. "Arthur Harrington is incapacitated. The medical reports are clear. He is a vegetable. We have a fiduciary responsibility to save this company from his senility." She gestured to the massive screen on the wall, which displayed a live video feed from a detention center. Marcus Thorne, wearing an orange jumpsuit, but looking as arrogant as ever, nodded into the camera. "Linda is right," Thorne's voice boomed through the surround sound speakers. "Sell the company to Sterling Holdings. We wash our hands of the scandal, the stock price stabilizes, and everyone in this room walks away with a 7-figure bonus. It's the only logical move," the board members murmured. Greed was a powerful motivator. "I call for a vote," Linda announced. "Motion to invoke Article 25, dissolve Arthur's shares, and execute the sale. All in favor?" Hands began to rise. 1, 2, 5, 7. "Wait." The voice was quiet but commanded instant silence. Hiroshi Tanaka, the Japanese tech mogul who held a critical 15% stake, sat with his arms crossed. He hadn't raised his hand. "Mr. Tanaka?" Linda smiled, though her eyes were cold. "Is there a problem?" "We haven't heard from the Harrington proxy," Tanaka said calmly. "Corporate bylaws state that the majority shareholder must be present or represented." "The proxy is a thief," Thorne shouted from the screen. "She's a waitress who seduced an old man to get access to his accounts. She is barred from the building. She is probably halfway to Mexico by now. Besides," Linda added, "security has locked down the elevators. No one gets in or out until this vote is finished. Raise your hand, Hiroshi. Don't be the one to sink this ship." Tanaka hesitated. The pressure was immense. He slowly began to raise his hand. Clang. A metallic sound echoed through the room. It sounded like a pipe bursting. Everyone looked up at the ceiling. Thump. Scrape. The noise was coming from the heavy industrial ventilation grate in the corner of the room, directly above a decorative ficus tree. "What is that?" a board member whispered. "Rats," Linda dismissed. "Ignore it. The vote stands at..." Crash! The heavy metal grate exploded downward, tearing loose from the drywall. It slammed onto the floor, sending a cloud of drywall dust and soot billowing into the pristine air. Before the board members could scream, a pair of legs swung out of the hole. Frank O'Malley dropped to the floor, landing in a crouch. He was covered in grime, his suit jacket torn, looking like a demon rising from the underworld. He stood up, shaking the dust from his hair, and looked at the terrified executives. "Sorry about the mess," O'Malley grunted. "Traffic was murder." He reached up and helped a second figure descend. Jane Jenkins dropped down, landing gracefully. She was unrecognizable from the terrified waitress of a few months ago. Her face was smudged with black grease. Her hair was wild and she was breathing hard from climbing 20 floors through the ductwork. But in her hand, she gripped a leather briefcase as if it were a weapon. "Security!" Linda screamed, jumping up from her chair. "Get them out! Arrest them!" 2 guards by the main doors reached for their radios, but O'Malley was faster. He didn't attack them. He simply held up a small device and pressed a button. The electronic locks on the boardroom doors engaged with a loud thud. "Nobody leaves," O'Malley said, his voice dropping an octave. "And nobody enters. We're having a private meeting." "You are trespassing!" Linda shrieked, her face turning a blotchy red. "Marcus, look! It's the waitress!" "Shoot her!" Thorne yelled from the screen. "Guards, break down the door!" Jane ignored the chaos. She walked straight to the head of the table. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She walked with the rhythm of someone who owned the floor she stepped on. She slammed the briefcase onto the mahogany table. The sound cracked like a gunshot, silencing the room. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance," Jane said, her voice raspy but steady. "But I couldn't let you sell my company." "Your company?" Linda laughed, a shrill, nervous sound. "You are a delusional little girl. You own nothing. You are fired." "Am I?" Jane clicked the latches of the briefcase open. She pulled out a stack of documents. They were old, yellowed, and smelled of musty paper. She slid the first document down the long table. It spun perfectly, stopping right in front of Hiroshi Tanaka. "Mr. Tanaka," Jane said, "you are a man of honor. Please read the signature on the incorporation charter of 1998. Tanaka adjusted his glasses. He looked at the document. His eyes widened. "It is signed by Arthur Harrington," Tanaka said softly. "And Robert Jenkins." "Who is Robert Jenkins?" a board member asked. "My father," Jane declared, her voice ringing off the glass walls. "And the co-founder of this company. Linda and Marcus would have you believe Arthur built this alone. He didn't. My father designed the structural patents that made you all rich, and when they founded this company, they signed a 60-40 split agreement." "That means nothing," Linda shouted. "Robert Jenkins died a convict. His shares were forfeited." "That's what you thought," Jane said, pulling out the second document. "But you were sloppy, Linda. You didn't read the fine print of the partnership agreement. Clause 14, Section B. Jane recited it from memory, staring directly into the camera lens at Marcus Thorne. In the event of the death of a partner, shares do not revert to the company. They transfer to the direct biological heir, regardless of age or legal standing, to be held in trust until claimed. The room went deathly silent. "Robert Jenkins didn't forfeit his shares," Jane said. "He left them to me. I didn't know because you framed him and hid the paperwork, but I found it." She slammed a final piece of paper on the table. "This is a court-ordered DNA test confirming I am his daughter. And this," she pointed to the yellowed contract, "is the proof." "It's a forgery!" Thorne screamed from the monitor. "She faked it!" "Mr. Tanaka," Jane asked, "does that look like a forgery to you?" Tanaka ran his thumb over the embossed notary seal on the 20-year-old paper. He looked at the ink degradation. He looked at the DNA result. He slowly stood up. He looked at Linda, then at the screen with Thorne, and finally at Jane. "It is authentic," Tanaka announced. "I recognize the notary seal. It is from my own legal firm, decades ago." Tanaka turned to the board. "If Ms. Jenkins owns 40% of the shares, and she holds Mr. Harrington's proxy for his 60%, then I control 100% of the voting power in this room." Jane finished the sentence. The color drained from Linda Sterling's face. She collapsed back into her chair, her legs giving out. On the screen, Marcus Thorne was shouting inaudible profanities, realizing his checkmate was absolute. Jane leaned over the table, placing her hands flat on the wood. She looked at the 12 powerful men and women who had watched her get humiliated, who had cut off her mother's medicine, who had treated her like dirt. "Motion to sell the company is denied," Jane said. "New motion. The immediate termination of Linda Sterling for corporate espionage and fraud." "You can't do this to me," Linda wept. "I have a contract." "You have a pair of handcuffs waiting for you," Jane said coldly. "Mr. O'Malley, open the doors." O'Malley grinned and deactivated the lock. The doors burst open, but it wasn't security guards who rushed in. It was the FBI, as agents swarmed the room, handcuffing a sobbing Linda Sterling and seizing the computers. Jane stood still in the center of the storm. Tanaka walked up to her. He bowed low, a sign of deep respect. "Welcome home, Ms. Jenkins," he said. "Or should I say, Madam Chairwoman." Jane looked at the monitor one last time. Marcus Thorne was being dragged away from the camera by prison guards, screaming. Jane reached out and calmly pressed the end call button, cutting him off mid-scream. The screen went black. The silence that followed wasn't terrifying anymore. It was peaceful. Jane's journey proves that integrity is the most expensive luxury of all, and the truth always has a way of coming out, even if it has to crawl through a ventilation shaft to get there. Marcus Thorne thought he could crush a nobody, but he forgot that diamonds are made under pressure. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please smash that like button. It helps the channel so much. Don't forget to share this with a friend who loves a good karma story, and subscribe so you never miss the next drama. What would you do if you found that file? Let me know in the comments below.